Hello, everybody, and welcome to my weekly live Q&A, episode 32. My name is Danny Segura, mixed martial arts reporter for MMAJunkie.com. And like I said, this is my weekly live Q&A where I answer all your questions regarding the combat sports world and more. So the way this works, pretty simple. You've submitted questions via Twitter. I'm going to answer those first. Later in the later part of this video, I will be taking your questions dropped in the YouTube live chat. So if you didn't get to answer or ask questions, my bad, via Twitter, it's okay. You'll get a chance to do so in the live chat. So let's get started here. Episode 32, by the way, 32, for those that don't know, nobody knows this. It's my lucky number. I have two lucky numbers, 17 and 32. So it'll probably be a good episode, right? Maybe jinxing it, knock on wood. But yeah, a lot to talk about. We just wrapped up UFC Vegas 7 or UFC on ESPN 15, which was headlined by a bantamweight bout with Frankie Edgar and Pedro Munhoz. Great fight, by the way, great card. Not the most stacked card, to be honest. It kind of felt like a Contender Series card, but it had a pretty good main event. And then we're also coming off on Friday off Bellator 244, which was a pretty good card. I actually enjoyed that one very much. Some surprising results there. And then this weekend we got UFC Vegas 8, which is like UFC on ESPN Plus, like 30, I don't even know, 33. That's a good card as well. Also, there's been a shit ton of news, just a bunch of matchups announced. I mean, I've never seen a week this busy of fights that were announced. Usually, for those that are that listen to my podcast, Hablemos MMA on MMA Junkie, at the end I do kind of like a news recap / also like matchups announced, also matchups that fell through. And yeah, and then I was going through the bouts and I'm like, Jesus Christ. Usually I get to mention a good amount, especially like the bigger ones and the ones that relate to the Latin American scene. But this time around, there was just so many. It was ridiculous. I had to leave a lot of matchups that were fairly big that otherwise would have made the lineup. But I just had to leave them out because of just time constraints. So it was quite crazy. So we can talk about that. Also, big news with Jon Jones leaving the light heavyweight division, vacating his belt, moving up to heavyweight. That's pretty big. And there's a bunch of other things going on. So let's get started with the Twitter questions. Again, if you got questions and you want to throw them on the YouTube live chat, you can do that at any point during the video, and I will get to it in the later part of this program. Sounds good? So also, I got a little bit of an update, some news, more personal news. I will be talking about that towards the end of the video, and it kind of involves this. So yeah, stay tuned to that. So let's get this party started with 8 Paths of Wokeness, the biggest troll in MMA today. Let's see, the Dustin Poirier hater. I'm starting to think he actually really likes Dustin Poirier because every question that he has, it's always surrounding Dustin Poirier. But anyways, 8 Paths of Wokeness asks, do you see Jon Jones at heavyweight sooner or later? I think July 2021 or somewhere for his debut. Good question. Yeah, so it seems from what Jon Jones said that from what Jon Jones has been saying, it seems he does want to take some time to acclimate to heavyweight, and he wants to hit the weights and get jacked. So I think that's a good idea. I think you don't want to just move up to heavyweight and just fight as a light heavyweight. I think you can have success doing that, but ultimately you want to be positioned in the best way possible. And obviously being a champion, a former champion, now I guess at light heavyweight, one of the greatest of all time, you can expect that he's going to be getting some pretty big fights at heavyweight, so he's got to be ready. So in my opinion, he's got to watch out and not get too bulky because that can cost him. I think what he needs to do is, one, get bulky, not too bulky, but put on some size to be able to, if it's needed, if it's required, if it calls for, so he can fight fire with fire. You know what I'm saying? There's certain positions, there's certain situations that will require you. Obviously, there's always some degree of technique everywhere in mixed martial arts, but there's some positions, certain scenarios that require just strength and who's the stronger man. So yeah, he needs to bulk up a little bit, and then on top of that, he needs to he needs to train and fight and spar with weight that he would normally would want to fight with at heavyweight, just so he can get used to that, just so his legs don't gas out. He's aware of his timing, his speed with the extra weight, etc. So I assume it's gonna take him some time. Say what you want about Jon Jones. I know a lot of people don't like him, but you can't deny that the guy is a very, very intelligent fighter, and he's got a very smart team behind him. So I'm assuming they're going to take this move up to heavyweight very seriously. I don't see him competing in heavyweight for the remainder of 2020. I mean, we got 4 months left. I don't think so. And if you look at the schedule, I think the last UFC pay-per-view, it's December 12th, if I'm not mistaken, and that already has a title fight with Amanda Nunes, the GOAT of women's MMA, taking on Megan Anderson. So it just seems already that all the pay-per-views for the remaining of the year already have a title fight. So Adesanya, Costa 253, Khabib, Gaethje 254, 255, Megan and Nunes might squeeze in at 256. Maybe at the end of the year, I don't know. I assume they would probably find another title fight for that. But I feel like I'm missing. I'm sorry, no. 255 is Cody Garbrandt and Davison Figueiredo and the women's flyweight title fight as well. And then 256 is Nunes versus Megan Anderson. So yeah, it looks already pretty busy. So I don't think Jon Jones will be fighting at heavyweight. That's assuming he gets an immediate title shot, right? Most likely, if he moves up. So I assume he's going to take some time. So yeah, I think 2021, I think the late first quarter of 2021, maybe early second quarter of 2021, we can see him at heavyweight. I think this is a great move. I think this is a win-win for the UFC. I don't know why they were so reluctant to get the guy up to heavyweight, because if you really look at it, any fight that he's involved in, even against Curtis Blades, Derek Lewis, it doesn't have to be Francis Ngannou or Stipe. Literally, name anybody at heavyweight, it's going to be a super fight. I mean, there's going to be a lot of intrigue. It's going to be big. It's just going to feel big. I mean, I already feel it. It's just going to feel like a super fight. It's going to feel like, I feel like Jon Jones' career towards the end here in his light heavyweight run got a little bit stagnated, and I feel like fans weren't as excited because, one, the type of opponents that he was facing, they weren't the biggest names. They weren't the legends that he was dismantling on his way up and in his early title reign. And so I feel like it was getting a little boring, too much domination. And even then, the fights were pretty close, and they were getting even more competitive than before. But there was still some sort of all right, dude, we get it. You're the best 205er ever. At this point, you can always further it with another title defense, but really by how much? I mean, let's be honest. It's pretty clear cut that he's the greatest light heavyweight ever, and I don't think anyone's gonna break his record for quite some time. So anyway, so you inject sort of this fresh feel into his career with the move to heavyweight. All of a sudden, you got huge fights at heavyweight. You got another player in that division. Heavyweight has been looking a division that historically people have criticized, and not only that, but rightfully so. It was kind of shitty, to be honest, for so many years. Heavyweight is starting to become one of the better divisions in the UFC. And then light heavyweight is nice now because you don't have Jon Jones, so it's, it breaks the monotony, right? And then you got fighters, basically it's a free-for-all for that belt. So everyone that's lost to Jon Jones before, they kind of get a second life. Teixeira, and that's pretty much the entire division. Teixeira, Reyes, Thiago Santos. I mean, there's so many guys that have lost to Jon Jones. All of a sudden, they get a new life because, the guy that they lost to is no longer champion. So, it's just a win-win everywhere. I'm excited for the light heavyweight division. I'm excited for the heavyweight division. I mean, this move is fun. It's exciting. And I'm looking forward to it. All right, Michael Terrell asks, who fights the winner of Reyes Jan Blachowicz? So for those that don't know, with Jon Jones moving up to heavyweight, now the UFC has booked a title fight for the vacant belt between Reyes and Jan Blachowicz. Rightfully so. These two guys were the two top contenders there. Jan Blachowicz recently defeating Corey Anderson, I think, rankings-wise, and as far as following the order of who's up next, I think it was pretty clear that it was Jan. However, Reyes was coming off a really close fight against Jon Jones. A lot of people, including myself, thought that Jon Jones won that fight. I mean, that Reyes won that fight. So he had a sort of a foot in the race just because, a horse in the race, just because he had that really close fight, right? So, and he's also a fantastic fighter. So I think those two were the runner-ups of who would fight Jon Jones. So with Jon Jones leaving a division, it only makes sense to have those two. So I like that fight very much. And now I guess people wondering, whoever wins, who are they fighting next? And we do have a booking that is a pretty low-key booking just because, again, like I said, last week was just crazy amount of news. But otherwise, it would have been a pretty big bout. I'm looking up Thiago Santos here, and then Thiago Silva pops up, the soccer player who's going to Chelsea from PSG. I like that move very much. Anyways, but Thiago Santos is facing Glover Teixeira, and that's September 12th? Really? Huh. That's happening pretty quick. I didn't know it was that quick. So yeah, apparently Thiago Santos is fighting Glover Teixeira September 12th, and that's around the corner. That's the main event of that card. Let's see here. September 12th. Yep, and yeah, it's a pretty big bout. I mean, Thiago Santos also had a very close fight with Jon Jones, and I think when he fought Jon Jones, a lot of people had him. I don't know. At least me personally, I didn't think he was really a top contender. I had seen him sort of come up short before against guys like, David Branch, against guys. I remember the Gegard Mousasi one. He really. The Eric Spicely, I mean, he had some losses that were just bad, where he got knocked out or submitted by Eric Spicely, who, is not the most imposing guy, at least physically. And then, he it was kind of like a fight where you're just like, all right, he's the next guy, up in line. He's beating some guys. I guess he's up next. But once they fought, I mean, I feel like that at least changed my opinion on him, and I feel like it did for many people, where you're just like, holy shit, this guy's legit. This guy's badass. Fighting on, like, his knees were all messed up. He's still swinging. Cracks pretty hard. Always punching all the way to the end of the fight. And even then, he took Jon Jones to a split decision. I thought Thiago Santos won that fight as well. So anyways, he's fighting Glover Teixeira, who's also on a nice run. He's had a nice career resurgence here. What's his latest win streak? He's in a 4-fight win streak, man. In the light heavyweight division, that's something. And he's beaten Anthony Smith, Nikita Krivlov, Carl Robertson, Ian Kutalava. So those are good names, and he's won 2 Performance of the Night bonuses in those 4 fights. So pretty solid run here. I really like Teixeira. He's one of my favorite fighters to watch, and I love these guys. I think he gets in the class of like the Junior Dos Santos, the Alistair Overeem, and the Andrei Arlovsky. I think those guys, and I don't know why it happens in the heavier weights, but those guys have found a way to reinvent their fighting styles after years of fighting a specific way, reinventing and changing their fighting styles to accommodate, their deficiency now as they've been getting older in certain athletic areas. And not only athletic, but also just like chin-wise, like Alistair Overeem. I mean, we know how his physique was at some point and how his physique is now. It's completely different. He used to be able to take shots and eat them like nothing. All of a sudden, I'm not saying his chin is weak, but it certainly wasn't as strong as it used to. But he's found a way to go around that, and that shows incredible fight IQ. To be able to, we just see guys, like we just saw Frankie Edgar this weekend. I love Frankie Edgar. I think he's a great fighter, but that's a guy that's stuck to his style the entire time. He doesn't really have many new tools, to be quite honest. He has new tools, but not enough that it has changed his style. Like Overeem is fighting like a completely different fighter. If I showed you a silhouette of Overeem now and the Overeem of 6-7 years ago, you'd think it'd be completely different fighters. I mean, they just fight differently. Same thing with Junior Dos Santos, same thing with Andrei Arlovsky, and same thing with Glover Teixeira. Glover Teixeira has slowed down a lot. He no longer has the same speed. He's not as durable, but now he's having sort of a more of a grappling-based game. He's relying a little bit more on that. And if he finds success on the feet, he'll take advantage of that, but he won't be shy to throw in there a takedown. And, his ground game's still very legit. He's a very good grappler. So I have a lot of respect for Teixeira because guys are able to sort of have a new chapter in their career close to their 40s, late 30s, and changed their style completely from what they've been doing for years. That's just super impressive. And I think, he's up there. You compare him with the Junior Dos Santos, with the Alistair Overeems, with the Andrei Arlovski, So he's in a nice streak. I remember not so long ago, after his latest win, which was over Anthony Smith, I spoke to his coach, the pitmaster, John Hackleman. And he was basically breaking down, Glover Teixeira 2.0, and there's definitely a thing to it. Now he's going to the PI, training a little smarter. He added a boxing coach that's very good as well, but he's also training with John, so he's mixing things quite nice. And he didn't have any. When I asked him, I'm like, all right, so should he go in a title run? He's looking good. Should he fight Jon Jones? Would you like to see that? And he didn't want that fight. And I think it's fine for fighters to be at a certain point of their careers to kind of just want to fight, because that's what they do. They're still good at it. They make a good amount of money doing that, and they're still competitive, and I think that's fine, kind of like a Jim Miller. So I don't know if he has any interest of fighting for the belt. Maybe now that Jon Jones left the division, maybe there's something to it. Maybe he has a little bit of interest. So I think the winner of that fight should challenge Reyes versus the winner of Reyes versus Blachowicz. Most likely Thiago Santos. If Thiago Santos wins, I think it's pretty clear that he's up next. If Glover Teixeira were to win, because of the things I mentioned before with my conversation with his coach, I don't know if he'd won a title fight. And he's 40. Having a belt means you have to be active, right? I don't know if he wants to be that active in the division. So I don't know. But if Thiago Santos wins, make Thiago Santos versus the winner of Reyes versus Blachowicz. If Glover wins, it's up to him. But I think the conversation changes. So we'll see. But that's a great fight. And I think the winner of that bout should challenge for the belt next. All right. Next question here. A Passive Wokeness, back at it again. He's taking over this live Q&A. There we go. So another interesting fight here developing. I've seen some traction develop here. And it's A Passive Wokeness is asking, Edgar versus Cruz next. Top five all matched up. So big name for Frank. Maybe Faber. So he actually fought Faber at 104. What weight class did he fight Faber? I think 145 pounds. That was one of Edgar's first fights, if I'm not mistaken, at 145. And he beat Edgar pretty convincingly. From what I remember, it wasn't that competitive. Let me pull up his record here. Let's see. Yeah, so he beat Uriah Faber in 2015. Yeah, and that was 5 fights into his featherweight career. So, it's been a minute. And he got a victory, a unanimous decision win. I wonder what were the scores on that. I mean, from what I remember, they were pretty, 50-45, 50-45, 50-45. So, pretty dominant. Frankie Edgar winning every round. So, I wouldn't like to see that. I think Frankie Edgar has also maintained a certain level of skill and athleticism, whereas Faber maybe is not as good as he used to. I would say the same thing with Frankie Edgar. I think previously he was much better, but he still hasn't had a big drop off. I think he's very competitive. He proved that on Saturday night, obviously taking Munhoz to a decision and beating him, someone who's in the top 5. So I think I wouldn't like to see that fight. I think the Cruz one is interesting. For a long time, I think when Edgar was champion at 155. Cruz also was champion, right? At least in the WEC. I don't know if he got to be champion in the UFC while Edgar was at 155. But those guys were kind of like the pioneers a little bit of that era, I guess, or the faces of that era of the lighter weight classes. So it'd be kind of nice to have that fight. I think both guys would want it. I think both guys would want it for the record because, whoever wins, they would have a big name over a legend, you can say at this point, right? Like, it'd be nice to have Dominic Cruz as a victory, right? It'd be nice to have Frankie Edgar on your resume as a victory. So I think that fight makes sense. I think it makes all the sense in the world. I'm going to pull up the rankings here to make sure I'm not leaving anyone out. Maybe there are other options out there. I don't know, but I think you're onto something here, A Passive Wokeness. Let me see. So bantamweight. So the rankings haven't been updated, I think, because Edgar's not in in the rankings, and I assume he's at least top 10 with a victory over Pedro Munhoz, and Pedro Munhoz is still top 5. So yeah, these haven't been updated. They'll probably be updated in the coming days. So you got Marlon Moraes up top. He's going to be fighting Corey Sandhagen. Then you got Aljamain Sterling. Apparently he's fighting for the title, and he should. Definitely deserves it. Then right below that, you got Cody Garbrandt at number 3, but he's gone south to 125 pounds. For Sandhagen, like I said, he's fighting Moraes. Pedro Munhoz, 5. He just lost to Frankie Edgar. 6. Jose Aldo. I wouldn't like to see a Jose Aldo Frankie Edgar, like, what, 4th fight now at 135? No way. Then you got Jimmy Rivera at number 7. I think he should be fighting Marlon Vera. Then after that, it's Hassan Sal, Rob Font, Dominic Cruz, Corey Stanman, Merab. But yeah, no, I think the I think the Cruz makes the most sense. And not only that, but I think the Dominic Cruz fight, again, it's a big fight as well. Frankie Edgar should be in big fights, and if Frankie Edgar were to get a win over Dominic Cruz, I think it would put him right there in the title mix. You know, if he doesn't get a title shot, he'd definitely be a fight away from it. And, you know, he wants that belt, and he's running up against the clock here. He's 38. So, yeah, I'm all for it. Make that fight. And Dominic Cruz wants big fights, wants title fights or big fights. So, if you can't get a title fight because you're coming off a defeat at 135 against the cringe master himself, Henry Cejudo, the next best thing in that division is either Aldo or Frankie Edgar. I would like to say though, Dominic Cruz versus Aldo. I think that's a lot of fun. I think Aldo versus Garbrandt too is a lot of fun. So yeah, we'll see. We'll even see if Aldo sticks around at 135. I think his body's too dwindled down to move up to 145, to be honest. And he might be a little bit too big to like have a long sustained career at 135. So I really just see him logging in maybe a couple more fights at 35 and dipping out, to be honest. All right. How fun is that bantamweight division? I love it. It's great. The Executioner 91. Shouts out to the homie. Always faithful. He asks, Leon Edwards was vocal this weekend. What's next for my man? To me, Jorge fight makes sense with the way the division is. Are you surprised many fans, and he throws that in quotes, are just brushing away Leon in that contest? Crying emoji. In my opinion, he wins that fight by decision pretty easily. Who would you pick? Let me pull up the division rankings here. So, yeah, it's a bummer, man. It's kind of very... And I think the media is a little bit guilty of this as well. But yeah, a lot of people are brushing aside Leon Edwards. But the man's a legit contender. The man has the tools and the skills to be champion. I mean, he really does. But... sort of the promotion side of things hasn't really been in his favor. He was going to get a big opportunity fighting Tyron Woodley in March, if you recall, in London, in his hometown main event. So, or is he from London yet? So it would have been a big moment for him, but the pandemic hit. So he's also had some bad luck as well. It's not only that the UFC hasn't promoted him or the media hasn't gotten behind him. You know, whenever I think Leon Edwards at this point, if he wants to do an interview with someone, I don't think anyone will say no. I mean, he's a contender. He's obviously a name in the division. But perhaps he doesn't have as much pop, at least promotionally, as others. Let's see here. So Masvidal is in a weird spot, in a good weird spot. These are good problems. These are problems you want to have because he's no champion, but he does have the name of a champion. He does have a name that he's obviously one of the bigger stars in the UFC. So it's kind of hard to match him up because you can't just give him any contender. I think the Leon Edwards fight makes sense if it makes sense ranking wise. And I know they have the history because of 3-piece Minnesota and all that. Yeah, I like that fight. I like that fight. You can't. I feel like media and I'm guilty of this. I think when guys reach a certain level like Nate Diaz or Jorge Masvidal, right? These stardom levels, you always want to have them in big fights. But to be honest, like you can't always have them in big fights because there isn't unless there was 10 stars in the welterweight division, then okay, but there isn't. So what, you can do a rematch with Diaz? To be honest, I'm not really about that. I think it was pretty convincing that Masvidal was the better fighter, or is the better fighter. So I wouldn't like that. I mean, who else really in that weight class? I think the Covington fight would have been nice. I think both of them are obviously ranked up pretty high in the top 5. Covington is a bigger name than Leon Edwards. Those two got a lot more beef. I know the whole three-piece in the soda was nice, and that became kind of popping, but these guys have serious beef. I mean, they used to be best friends. They used to be teammates. No longer teammates, no longer friends. They hate each other's guts. I think that would be a big fight, and it would have made sense. But we know Covington is now fighting Tyron Woodley. So I don't know, but I like that fight. I'll tell you guys a story. So I went down to American Top Team in when was this? I think November or September. I forget now. Before the world went to shit. And I was shooting some interviews. I did multiple interviews that day, and one of them was with Masvidal. And I got there early to like set up and shit. And Colby Covington was, so the way when you walk into American Top Team, it's a big ass gym. It's fucking huge. It's crazy. Like it's like literally like 5 stories. So anyways, you walk in, there's a huge mat space. Then all the way to the right, there's like a big room that's like, it has walls and they're all matted. And then they have cage, so it's kind of like an open room. Think of it like a square, but without missing the top here. So this is just cage, so you can see through it, right? There's some fighters training there. Pedro Munhoz was training there, and I was setting up like right here. And then in front of it, there's an octagon. And then behind it, there's like a patch of grass where you can pull sleds and do other stuff, and that's more for like conditioning. And anyway, so Colby Covington was hitting pads there, and then I'm like setting up the camera, setting up the tripod, setting up shit, and I just start hearing like a little bit of commotion, and like it's a big gym, everyone's training, everyone's fighting, whatever, hitting pads. So I didn't think nothing of it, and then it kind of got a little louder, and I'm like, what the fuck? So I turn around, and Covington was behind the octagon, sort of at the training area. And then Masvidal was on the other side of it, so an octagon was in between them, and they were just yelling mad shit at each other. No cameras, no media. I didn't even think they realized I was there. And they're just like, yeah, like just talking shit to each other for like a couple minutes. And there was like people kind of there, like, I mean, it was okay. Like, I don't think they were going to fight each other, but like there was certainly people like paying attention. And then like Masvidal goes his way, and then Covington leaves the gym, and on his way out he's like yeah, I'm leaving, man, because I'm like, oh, can you down for an interview? And he's like, no, I gotta go. If I stay around, I'm gonna punch this guy in the face, this and that. And I'm like, ooh, okay. Like that shit is real. I know a lot of people were questioning like, hey, I don't know if this whole beef is legit, but it is. So I'd like to see that at some point. That'd be kind of fun. But anyway, so Covington is tied up with Woodley. So it makes sense. Rankings-wise, it makes sense. I would understand if Masvidal doesn't want to fight anytime soon, because he probably made some good money fighting Kamaru Usman, and he just wants to take a break. I mean, he's been busy. I would understand that. But if he wants to be busy, I think the Leon Edwards fight makes sense in the rankings. Most of the guys are tied up. That makes sense. And yeah, I like it. I mean, Stephen Thompson fight would be nice as well. I mean, they fought before. I don't know if Thompson won, I believe. So I don't know if Masvidal would want to avenge that fight. That would make sense too. Or if he wants to wait for Covington, if Covington were to beat Tyron Woodley, so who knows. But as of now, what is it today? August 25th, it makes sense. The Leon Edwards versus Jorge Masvidal fight makes a lot of sense. And who would I have in that one? I think Masvidal, to be honest. I think I favor Masvidal against any striker, really, because he's able to wrestle, mix things up, plus his boxing is so good. I think he beats Leon Edwards. I think Masvidal, his kryptonite there is guys like, maybe like Gilbert Burns, guys like Kamaru Usman, guys that can wrestle, guys that are physically imposing and can pin you down and take you down. Again, he has the jiu-jitsu and the wrestling to like defend that and kind of stall that out. But at the end of the day, you're fighting within 25 minutes, and judges have to grade and score the fight. And when you're constantly defending and putting, getting your back put against the cage and this and that, you lose on the scorecard. So I don't see anybody finishing Jorge Masvidal. That guy's that good. But I can definitely see guys that have a strong wrestling background or a grappling background definitely shutting him down a little bit. So I don't think Leon Edwards has those tools. I think Masvidal beats Edwards, but it's a good fight. All right, A Passive Wokeness back at it again. Like I said, he's taking over this thing. He asks, Tony washed up, or did he just have a bad night against a great Justin? Either way, how do you see Tony versus Dustin going down? So This is a great question, and I had Javier Mendez, Khabib's coach, and Ken's coach, Cormier's coach, on Monday's episode of Hablemos MMA. We spoke in Spanish. His Spanish is great, by the way. I had interviewed him before in English, and when I asked him, I'm like, hey, Javi, you speak Spanish? You're down for an interview? I got the Spanish podcast with MMA Junkie now. He's like, yo, at your own risk. Like, my Spanish is, I don't know, it's not that great. And I'm like, all right, fuck it. Let's see what happens, And it ended up being pretty good. Like, we had a full conversation and no problem. Everything that he wanted to express, he was able to do so. Obviously, he feels more comfortable in English. He came to the U.S. when he was like 2-3 years old. He was telling me he was born in Mexico. So obviously, it's hard to pick up Spanish living in the U.S. Obviously, an English-speaking country. But his Spanish is as well. Like, he has no issue of expressing himself and what he wants to say. So, he just needs to practice it a little bit more, but it's great. So anyways, so I talked to him about Ferguson for a little bit. I'm like, who do you think is more dangerous, Gaethje or Ferguson? And he said Ferguson, and he's like, look, I don't want to take anything away from Justin, but to me, Tony Ferguson, he fucked things up by doing that second weight class. He screwed himself over by cutting that second weight, I don't care what anyone says. I don't care what anyone thinks. But to me, he screwed himself over by making that second cut just 30 days out from another fight. He said, if I were his coach, I'd tell him, you're not making it. You're not cutting that weight. You're not going down to 155. I will fight you. That's what he said. I will fight you if you try to make 155 30 days out from your fight against Justin Gaethje. We know that historically, Tony Ferguson is one of the bigger lightweights. He might not be like the most muscular guy. He comes off as skinny, but his frame's big. Like, his back's really wide, and his arms are just freakishly long. And I've heard he walks around like 190 pounds, some shit like that. So, pretty drastic weight cut, man. And when you see him on the scale, he doesn't look pretty. He looks pretty drained. So, I believe it too, man. I mean, not to take anything away from Justin, I think there were other factors as well. You got to keep in mind that Tony Ferguson was fighting one of the greatest, in my opinion, probably the best wrestler in MMA, period, in Khabib Nurmagomedov. And then all of a sudden, he's fighting one of the most dangerous, one of the best strikers, in the company. Like, that's not fair, man. That's not fair. I mean, he took the fight. He could have said no, right? He's his own man, but a huge change in strategies, a huge change in matchup. The entire time he was training for a wrestler, and all of a sudden he gets a power striker. And then on top of that, he does that second weight cut. And Javier Mendez was saying, look, the Tony that I'm used to seeing, and take it, you got to take everything with a grain of salt when coaches are talking about. I think they always give an honest assessment. I really do believe that they're saying what they themselves believe. But you also got to keep in mind, they're a bit biased if they're talking about their own guy, right? If he's talking about Khabib, obviously you're going to keep in mind he's going to be a little bit biased because that's his student, and rightfully so, right? Like, I'm not faulting anybody for that. But when coaches are talking about other fighters where they have no interest at all, in play there, like, you got to take those type of comments seriously, especially someone as seasoned, someone as knowledgeable as Javier Mendez. So Javi was telling me, like, the Tony that I'm used to seeing, and keep in mind, they've been getting ready for him for 4 or 5 different fights, so they know Tony quite well. He's like, the Tony that I'm used to seeing did not fight that night. I don't care what anyone says. That second weight cut fucked him over. The Tony I'm used to seeing, that wasn't it. That wasn't it. You also got to keep in mind, some time has passed. He is older. Tony Ferguson is 36? 38 maybe? Let me look that up so I'm just not talking shit here. He is older, you know what I'm saying? So, it could be father time also catching up to him. Maybe it's a combination of all three. They change 36. The change in matchup, the second weight cut, the age. I don't know. But in my opinion, the bout with Dustin Poirier is not official. Dana White said it's a likely matchup that they're going to do. Tony Ferguson has been teasing that he's got a fight coming up. That fight makes sense. They're both up there. It's one hell of a fight. Shit, that's going to be a crazy-ass fight. Probably fight of the year, maybe. I don't know. But it promises a lot of action. And it looks like that's the way it's going if they do book it. I'm very curious to see how that fight looks, and I have questions. I think if the Tony Ferguson that we're used to seeing shows up, the Tony Ferguson of old, let's just call it for sake of this question, I think he wins. Because, to be honest, he's one of the greatest lightweights ever. Unfortunately, he didn't have a belt to sort of not back that up. But I really do think he's the uncrowned king in that weight class. Not saying that he can beat Khabib, but I have questions. I wonder, and I think many people do as well. I don't know if we'll ever get to see that matchup. Maybe he goes on a losing streak from now. Again, like I said, he's 36, or maybe he just picks up where he left off, right? I don't know. But in my opinion, I think Tony Ferguson wins that if the Tony Ferguson that we're used to seeing shows up. If any lesser version shows up, Dustin Poirier is game. He's one of the greatest fighters in the lighter weight classes. Obviously, he had a pretty good career at 145 pounds. He's a complete killer. He's always improving. He's tough as shit. His striking's amazing. The heart of a champion. His grappling's pretty damn good as well. I don't think he'll get subbed by Tony Ferguson. If you're just one step off your game fighting Dustin Poirier, a motherfucker will chew you up. Even if you're 100%, he'll chew you up as well. But I just think, again, Ferguson is right behind Khabib. I think he's one of the greatest lightweights that's competed. So I got Ferguson. But again, I have questions after that performance. Also, keep in mind he took a pretty bad beating against Justin. So to answer your question, Apex of Wokeness, I don't know if he's washed up. I don't know, and we'll find out in his next bout. Because if you were to look at the performance against Gaethje can do that against anyone, first of all. And then all the factors that I said, the second weight cut, the change in opponents, right? Age, all those factors could play a role in that fight. So I don't know if he's washed up. I don't know. I have no idea. We'll find out in his next outing for sure. I love that fight though. It's a great fight. Makes sense. Hopefully they announce it soon. It'd be nice to watch. All right, the Executioner 91 back at it again. MMA media. Oh, I love this question, by the way. When I was reading it, I favored it. I was like, yes. MMA media is too heavily focused on the UFC and large organizations. When will outlets start covering local scenes across the world? I know it's less clicks, but would certainly help the sport. Is this already being done, but it's just drawn out by popular news? Fantastic question, and I absolutely love it. So the reason why MMA Junkie and the bigger sites, MMA Fighting, and all these other media organizations cover mostly the UFC is because, one, they have the most events. Two, because they're the best and the biggest organization out there. Now that we do Bellator as well, we do one championship coverage too. We do. I think MMA Junkie does a pretty good job as well as doing regional coverage as well, kind of like the smaller cards as LFA and even Contender Series, right, and all these other things. Nolan King does a fantastic job with the Contender Series and brings a lot of light to those cards. I know it's still part of the UFC, but anyway, so we do cover some of the smaller promotions, like I said, LFA and a few others. Does do some coverage of Combate Americas as well. But at the end of the day, like, the best promotion is the UFC, and being MMA Junkie the biggest site in MMA today, we're gonna cover the biggest thing, right? And it's pretty much reflective of just like news outside of sports as well. If you look at news, the New York Times, sort of these big publications, they cover the biggest things, right? Whoever covers the local news, it's usually the smaller newspapers, the smaller sites, and every now and then you'll see one of the smaller sites be actually national news. So instead of local news, it becomes national news. Whether, for example, I'll give you a good example, like the Miami Herald, right? Obviously, it's still a big newspaper, but not as big as like the New York Times or anything like that. And then when there was the Parkland shooting in Florida, their shit blew up, and they were getting national coverage just because they were so good at covering their community in South Florida, that those type of stories do blow up, right? But what we've seen usually is that local news has been dying, and I'm not talking about sports. I'm just talking about local news in general. People just, because the world is, I guess, much bigger now, and people are just much more connected to the world, that you want to know about what's going on internationally. You want to know about the biggest things, but the local stuff is not necessarily getting covered. So that's getting far less clicks than anything. It's a problem. And small newspapers, small publications that cover local news are dying because simply people in the community are just not paying attention to what's going on in the community, and more paying attention to what's going on in the world. And it's very dangerous. People don't realize that news is vital to democracy. If you look at any good democracy, they have a strong news. The news and journalism is not repressed. If you look at like communist countries like China and others, like the news gets censored. The government tells journalists, what they can say and what they cannot say. People don't realize this, but journalism is a pillar to democracy. So like, it's very dangerous when people start throwing around fake news to like legit publications and all this and that, and have mistrust in journalism, because people don't realize journalism is the watchdog of the government, and that doesn't only work just from an actual government like the U.S. government, but any organization, right? Like, in this case, MMA media covering the UFC, like, just rewind a few months back with the whole pandemic shit. Like, who was there to keep in check? Like, hey, are there protocols to this? Are you doing COVID testing? All these other questions. Like, it was the media. It was the media arising those questions, right? So anyways, it's very important. So to your question, there is people doing local news. From my personal experience, as far as local MMA, I came up through the local scene. I was covering Fight Time Promotions, CFA, which were regional promotions in South Florida. And I had my own blog, and I would do results for every card that I would cover. I would do pre and post-fight interviews with the fighters that were just like 0-1, 1-0, 3-0, etc., that were just starting out. So you can get local news. There's guys like I used to do out there doing that type of work. I think now a lot of media members, especially starting out, want to like immediately start interviewing UFC fighters and covering UFC events and all that. And I think it's cool. I think it's great. But I would like to remind them, especially if anyone's watching here that would want to get into MMA media, start local, man. Start local, because for one, it's you get to sort of sharpen your knife and sort of craft your skill local. You get to make a lot of mistakes that are good to make, in the smaller stage rather than on the big one. You learn a lot as well. And you also do an important role. Don't think it's just practice and you getting better, but you're also doing an important role in telling a lot of these stories that, maybe the bigger sites won't, because, we're just busy with the UFC. I mean, there's been a UFC event for like every weekend for how many weeks now? Like, we're busy, man. We're busy as shit. So, it's like sort of the job for these smaller sites, these local sites, to cover the regional promotions. And there does need to be a little bit more coverage of that, and I hope that it grows, because like you said, it is certainly important to the sport. And I gotta tell you, like, one of the most rewarding things as a media member since I started local was watching all these guys like become pros and have a couple fights pros, and then seeing them get to the UFC. It's been pretty cool. I remember when I was in Tampa, when that card where Joanna Jędrzejczyk fought Michelle Waterson, Nico Price fought on that card. That's a guy that I saw come up through the regional circuit, and he was a fucking buzz. He was like fucking people up since day one. Like, all the fights were crazy. Like, I watched a bunch of Nico Price fights, like cage side, where like blood was like spilling like nearby and shit. And anyway, so like when I saw him, I'm like, yo, you remember me? He's like, yeah, Fight Time Promotions, hey. So that was kind of tight. Erwin Rivera, who recently made it to the UFC, has another fight booked. I saw him come up. I covered him extensively when I was in covering the local scene. So like when I interviewed him for MMA Junkie, it was kind of nice, because like I went from having my own blog to working for MMA Junkie, and he made it from fighting in a local promotion that not even televised or streamed to the UFC. So when we interviewed each other, was quite nice. Or each other. When I interviewed him, it was quite nice. And things like that. It's pretty rewarding. So I hope there's more coverage about that. And yeah, if you're a journalist watching this and wanting to get into the MMA media, start local. That doesn't mean you can't do UFC. You should try to get the biggest interviews possible as well. But also keep an eye on the local scene. Your coverage is needed, and it's important. Great question. I love it. The Seaside. Shouts out to the Seaside. I love this guy. Or girl. I don't know. Either or. Is there any particular fighter who impressed you from Dana White Contender Series? So yeah, there's been a couple. Now, I'm not the best. I watch the fights usually, like I have them on here, my extra monitor, and I'm doing some work or just doing a few other things. But I do watch them. But I don't pay as much close attention as others. But I'll say this: there's been several fighters that have impressed me. So Jordan Levitt, obviously, who probably one of the bigger names, one of the bigger personalities that came out of this fourth season, picked up a nice submission win over Luke Flores. He looked very good on the ground. Has a cool personality. He seems quite quite colorful. So I'm looking forward to his career. Definitely a different personality added to the roster, so that's always cool. And he's got very good ground game. So I was very impressed by what he does. So looking forward to his UFC career. He impressed me. Also the Koshi, is that how you pronounce the Koshi brothers? That's pretty cool. You get brothers in the UFC. That's always tight, and those guys are tough as shit and very strong, very powerful fighters. So looking forward to their careers as well. And someone that impressed me that did not win was Luis Rodriguez. I thought he defeated Jerome Rivera in that first episode of season 4. And Luis Rodriguez impressed me a lot because, one, he looked like a very complete fighter. He had a lot of heart, very exciting fight. But he's also a fighter that fights out of Mexico. And it's very easy, or I wouldn't say it's very easy, but it's much easier to make it to the UFC in these bigger stages if you're fighting out of a big gym in the US. But it's hard for guys from Latin America who fight and train in Latin America to make it to the US. It's difficult. So for him to do that and be out there and not only that, but have a very impressive showing, and in my opinion, he won the fight, it definitely says something about him. I actually wanted to interview him really bad, but I got super busy and I had to get the podcast ready because the following week I was going to enter furlough. So then the following week, obviously I was in furlough, so I couldn't work, so I couldn't interview. And then time passed since this fight, and I feel like that kind of story died down a little bit, but maybe I should revisit it. I know it's been some time, but I think he definitely, I'd like to get his thoughts on that close fight and where he goes next. So maybe I'll set something up, and he only speaks Spanish, so maybe I can have him on an extra episode of Hablemos MMA. So that'd be kind of tight. But those were kind of the people that impressed me, and I mean, there's others as well that have been. Cheyenne had a pretty good performance, has a good personality, very young as well. Hopefully, I don't rush her. She seems very promising. There's good people out there. All right, so with that out of the way, that was the last Twitter question. Did Michael Terrell? I feel like Michael Terrell asked one, and then I didn't get to it, or I did get to it. Oh yeah, he did ask it. Okay, we're good. All right, so that was it for the Twitter questions. Now I'm gonna take questions from the YouTube live chat. So again, if you're just tuning in, my name is Danny Segura. In case you didn't know, like the video, subscribe to the channel so this thing can grow and we can improve this whole thing. Again, in a few minutes here, I'll have a little announcement regarding this whole thing and specifically for next week's episode. And yeah. So yeah, I'll do that towards the end. So anyways, taking questions from the YouTube live chat. So again, if you didn't get to ask questions via Twitter, you can do so in the YouTube live chat. At this point in time, Amy Wee, it's a name I haven't seen in a bit, I think. Any movies you're looking forward to? Amy, I hate to break it to you, but I've been just, I mean, look at these, I don't even know what they're called, ojeras in Spanish, but your boy's been playing Warzone late at night, getting dubs. I got 2 wins last night, feeling good and getting very good. I got my M13 loadout looking good, M91 as well with my LMG if I want to go long range with a hybrid scope, in case you were wondering. So anyways, I've been investing a lot of time in Warzone and in video games. I've been playing a shit ton of FIFA too. So I haven't been seeing kind of what's been out there. I mean, I don't even know. I'm going to put upcoming movies. We'll Google this real quick. I finished The Last Dance. That was pretty tight. Kind of inspired me to do great shit, to start getting doing physical shit, because I've been, since the pandemic hit, it's been a nightmare. I'm been lazy as shit, but I should get into it. Let's see, looking at the upcoming movies. Bro, I haven't heard of any of these. I'm telling you, I've been so out of touch with the entertainment industry. What's this? This looks kind of interesting. Candyman. This looks creepy as shit. What the? This is a horror movie. The present day, a decade after The last of the Cabrini towers were torn down. Anthony and his partner moved into a loft in the now gentrified Cabrini. A chance encounter with an old timer exposes Anthony to the true story behind Candyman. And anxious to these macabre details in the studio of a fresh as Grizz for paintings, he unknowingly opens a door to a complex past that unravels his own sanity and unleashes a terrifying wave of violence. All right, so it's by Jordan Peele. Shit, yeah, this looks tight. I love Jordan Peele. Yeah, and definitely with the gentrifier comment, definitely I was getting a feel of kind of like the shit. I love his movies. He did the one with the family. What's it called? Us. Yeah, that was great. I saw that. Also, what was the one with the white family, the black boyfriend? I think it was called fuck. That was a great movie. Get Out. Yeah, Get Out and Us. Those two were fucking great. Love them. Yeah, Jordan Peele is amazing. So I'll definitely watch that. Candyman. That looks pretty tight. Yeah, basically about like some white gentrifier paying high rent and getting exposed to like some macabre spirit or something, and gets possessed and unleashes a wave of violence. So very interesting. So I guess Candyman. I'm looking forward to Candyman and Amy. Jordan Peele's great. Anyways, David Lackaby asks, Till versus Hermanson. As a Brit, I want Till to win. But that's how but wow, that's a tough one. If it goes to the ground, I really rate Hermanson. He's a killer. How do you see this one going? Hashtag raw dog. Yeah, Till versus Hermanson. So I've always been like, yo, Till, you're young. You got the it factor. You got, the UFC behind you. You're skilled. You can crack. Shit, just fight a bunch of people outside of the top 10 and knock a bunch of fools out, build some momentum, build a nice career highlight, and then get into big fights. That's sort of been my approach. Y'all know if you've been watching me for quite some time, I like the boxing model. Maybe not 100% of the boxing model, but I think the MMA can use a certain degree of it as far as building prospects. And this ain't it, man. Fighting Hermanson, like you said, he's a killer. He's great on the ground, tough as shit. Good striker as well. Obviously his bread and butter's on the ground, but he's pretty competent on the feet. Shit, who do I got? Till's got a good takedown defense. I'm going to go with... Shit, that's a tough one. Ask me closer to the fight, but for now I'm going to go with... Shit. I'm gonna go with Till, but I don't know how I feel about that, because I feel like a wrestler can give him some issues, especially now in a bigger weight class. You're grappling with the big boys. No longer 170 pounders. So Hermanson is definitely game and can win that for sure. I mean, I'm 50-50, but I guess I'm gonna go with Till. I don't know. Close one. Is Paulo Costa a good or bad matchup for Adesanya? I think the forward pressure plays into Izzy's game, but I can also imagine Costa's willingness to eat shots and keep coming, giving him a chance. Oh, yeah, for sure. I think if you look at it this way, and I know it's not, the MMA math doesn't always work and it doesn't always translate, but Adesanya, for whatever reason, was very hesitant to strike against Romero. Why? Because Romero has that one knockout punch and is very explosive. If you look at the other strikers that he's actually gone toe-to-toe with, and I'm speaking about Adesanya, guys like Robert Whittaker, guys like Kelvin Gastelum, and Anderson Silva, those guys are more on the technical side of things and more on the volume side of things. Those not really power punchers like Romero. So I'm really curious to see if Adesanya is as hesitant as he was against Romero fighting Costa. If he is, we know that Romero had a hard time catching him, but I think Costa's a better striker than Romero and throws more volume. So in that sense, if Costa's like hunting him down, it could get kind of scary at certain periods. I think Costa's going to be has more experience sort of corralling people And, he's going to be throwing more, and obviously he still has the power. So I think things can get a little scary for Adesanya, but Adesanya always got that precision. I think it's a great matchup for both. People always say, like, oh, is it a bad matchup for this guy or the other? Sometimes fights are good matchups for both fighters. I think this one's good. I think in this case, Paulo Costa is going to be playing a role that he wants to play, which is moving forward, cutting the cage, right, hunting someone down. He wants to be doing that. And Adesanya wants to be at range fighting someone that's a little shorter, right? He doesn't necessarily want somebody that has the same attributes that he has. I actually think this fight is going to look a lot like the Kelvin Gastelum versus Paulo Costa, and I hope I'm not jinxing it, knock on wood, but I think it's going to be a thriller. I think it's going to be back and forth. I think both guys are going to have success and are going to be able to implement part of their game plans. I think we're going to be in it for a really good middleweight title fight. Both guys have good chins as well, so I don't suspect either guy will pick up a quick knockout. You never know, but both guys are pretty durable. So yeah, I think this will go the distance most likely. I hate to call it, but it seems year after year, decisions are getting closer and closer, and fights are getting harder to judge, and we might see one of those. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a pretty close fight that ends up, coming down to the wire and being very hard to score. I think so. Good question, CP. All right, let's see. It's 11:27. I might answer one more and dip out. This one, because I'll answer this one. I know some others asked some questions, but I think this one is more timely. I think next or in future episodes, this question won't come up, whereas the others probably will, since this is looking at the past and this is more looking at the future. But Ollie asks, how did you score Munhoz versus Edgar fight? I personally thought Pedro clearly won 4 rounds. And why don't you think fans are calling it a robbery when they unload on the Max Holloway versus Volkanovski 2 decision? So, good question. Maybe it's because Frankie Edgar is kind of like a fan favorite, so people wanted him to win anyways. I wouldn't say it's a robbery because, to be honest, I did have trouble scoring some of those rounds. Like, I'm going for Munhoz here, but Edgar could have won them certain rounds. But I agree with you. I thought I had it for Munhoz. I think it was a close fight, and I'm like, it could go either way. But certainly I was a little bit more sure that Munhoz won than I was more sure of the decision going towards a fighter than I have been in other previous fights that have been pretty close as well. So I think this was on the close side of things, but I don't think it was the closest fight we've ever seen. I did think, like I said, I thought Munhoz won, and I thought he did enough to take 3 rounds. You could make a good case that he took 4. I thought he took... So the first round was close. I think that round, it could have gone either way. But I remember giving it to Munhoz. So Munhoz was up 1 round. The second round, undoubtedly Frankie Edgar's best round in the entire fight. I gave it to Frankie Edgar. His volume was on point. He was avoiding a lot of the shots. He was landing often. Those leg kicks that Pedro Munhoz was having success with in the first round weren't really present in the second. So I think it was pretty clear that Frankie won the second. So they were tied up going into the third. Then the third and fourth, I thought Munhoz won those, and they were close, but they weren't as close as the first. The first, if you give it to Frankie, I'm like, okay. But the third and fourth, I did think that Munhoz did enough. So at that point, I thought Frankie Edgar needed a finish. And then the fifth, Frankie Edgar wobbled Munhoz towards the end of the round, and it was competitive. But I just think Frankie Edgar did the most damage and looked the best in that round. So I had it 3-2 for Munhoz. And again, with a round being the first one that could have gone to Munhoz. I'm acknowledging that it was sort of fair game in that one. So yeah, I can totally see a case where you scored it 4-1 for Munhoz. I'm hesitant to call it a robbery, but I think this is one of the fights that you can get the closest to with being a decision you disagree with without being a robbery. I don't know if that makes sense. It certainly wasn't like super close. I mean, it was close, but it wasn't the closest fight I've ever seen, or top 5 or anything like that. But it was a close fight. So I don't know. I don't know what went down there. Frankie Edgar did score some takedowns, things that Munhoz couldn't do. But again, Munhoz was able to get right back up. Frankie Edgar wasn't really able to threaten with any type of submission or land any significant shots from the ground and pound. So yeah, I don't know. But I thought Munhoz won. I do wonder how and this is something that Munhoz brought up, if Frankie Edgar's popularity or stardom or status as a former champ, how much that helped. I feel like maybe there's something to that. I don't know. I have no idea. But it was a close fight, Ollie. Yeah, like Ollie adding here in the comments, 17 out of the 20 media members thought Munhoz won the fight. Yep. I mean, I think most people did. But it was a close fight. Either way, it was one of those fights where, you can maybe say it was a robbery, maybe. But it was those fights where, like, you look at Frankie Edgar and you go, shit, this is your first fight at 135 pounds? You're taking on a top 5? Dude, you got a future. I don't know if you can be champion. I don't think he can be champion. That division is way too young. He's coming down to 135 at a very late stage in his career. If this was a few years ago, maybe. But I certainly think he can have more success at 135 pounds right now than he can at 145. So I think he can hang in the top 5. I think he can pick up very big wins at 135 pounds. I just have questions whether he can be champion or not. Maybe. But certainly a breath of fresh air into Frankie Edgar's career, a much-needed win, and we'll see what's next for him. You can't rule him out from winning the title, but I say his chances are slim. But certainly can be competitive with all the guys there. All right, so I'm going to call it quits here. Please don't be an asshole and log off just because I stop answering your questions. Quick announcement. So I'm going to South Florida. I'm going to Miami on Monday, and I'm driving down. So on Tuesday there will be no live Q&A because I will be driving. At that point, I'll probably be in North Carolina. I'm doing a pit stop there. I have some friends there, so I'll be staying with them. I'm taking Hachiko with me, who's right now guarding the door. But yeah, I'm gonna be down there for a few months. I'm going away. I got the blessing from my editor, so I won't be here in New York. I'll be eventually back to New York. I'm coming back to New York at some point. I don't know when, but definitely not trying to stay winter here in New York. If everything's closed right here in New York, things have been kind of rough, especially early in the pandemic. Right now, things are okay. The cases are not bad. I have a feeling we're going to get a second wave because of the reopening. People are starting to gather in groups and go out, and I don't fault them. You gotta have some sort of social life or you'll go crazy. But I do think a second wave will be coming at some point. And not only that, but I do think that restaurants and bars are still going to be closed only to the outdoors. And right now it's fine for my European listeners. Right now New York is like very much like Europe, where there's tables and outdoor dining like on the streets, which has been actually kind of nice. I think they should do this initiative even after we get through the pandemic. It's been kind of cool. It's been cool because I'm a dog owner, so I can take Hachi everywhere. So he's been bar hopping and, going places and going to parks and stuff. So it's been kind of cool. But yeah, so once winter rolls out, it's going to be rough because all the outdoor places, they're not going to exist because it's going to be snowing and it's going to be cold as shit and miserable. So really, we're just going to be locked up, and I'm not trying to, stay months in a 600 square foot apartment with a dog. So that's why I'm going to Florida, and I'm going to be working from there, and at some point making it back to New York. So because of the time, there won't be no live Q&A on next week. Maybe I'll do something on like Instagram Live for like 30 minutes or something if I stop somewhere and you guys want it, then I can do something like that. But as far as this YouTube weekly live Q&A, there will be none of that next week. But the following week, I'll resume operations. This whole setting, I'm taking all my equipment. That's why one of the reasons why I'm driving down, so I can take my shit. So this sort of background and this sort of setup, you won't see it. It will be a little different. I'm actually going to use that time to upgrade some things. So like this whole experience will improve because of that. I'm gonna upgrade a couple things. And then over time, I also have some things in the works as far as this improving this thing. So things are happening, things are moving. So I know I'm always talking shit about like how this thing's gonna improve. It will. Just hang tight. Give me a few weeks. And that's it. That's it. If you're a Spanish speaker, if you're listening to this, you don't know, I have a Spanish podcast, Hablemos MMA, with MMA Junkie. Tune into that. That will drop regularly on Monday, so that won't change. That will be good to go. And that's it. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, right here at Danny Segura TV. If you want pictures of Hachi and other stuff. That's it. Subscribe. You know the whole deal. Appreciate everybody that submitted questions via Twitter. Appreciate everybody that submitted questions via YouTube live chat. Tell your friends about it. Let folks know about this program. And yeah, that's it. That's all I got from you guys. Have a good week. Enjoy the fights this weekend. And stay safe. Wash your hands. Wear a mask. You know the whole deal. I'm out.